Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Wissam, an Iraqi student. Today, we will talk about education. One of the most important human rights is something on which societies, countries, and economies of entire countries are built. Countries compete for those who get the best education and try to invent the best ways of education and help the students to become a productive element in the future. Something we cannot do without. Education is the past, the present, and the future. Let's go back to the 70s and the 80s of the last century and talk about the education in Iraq. Iraqi education witnessed a quantum leap in the 70s and the 80s as literacy campaigns in Iraq were very useful, as illiteracy was eliminated by 90% in 1984. Education was compulsory for the primary level, where the number of child students enrolled in the primary school was 100%. UNESCO described Iraq as one of the best educational systems in the Middle East, and the educational system was compared to the educational systems in Scandinavia, which made Iraq a very distinguished country in the field of education. The average government spent on the Iraqi student was about $620. The sun remained shine and the bird chirped until 1991, when the government focused on war spending and Iraq was subjected to an economic blockade, which led to deterioration of services, including education. In 2003, after the fall of the previous regime, many schools were looted, some of which were destroyed by bombing and some of them were used for military purposes, which made the educational system in a very critical situation. As the wars clearly affected education in Iraq, education has become bad and getting worse every day, and education is suffering to this day. In shocking numbers at the level of education sector in Iraq, a member of the Iraqi Teachers Syndicate, Nasser Al-Kaabi, said that the United Nations informed them that there are 12 million literate people in Iraq, which is number more than the double of the previous figure announced by the Iraqi Ministry of Education in 2020, estimated at 5 million people who cannot read and write. Iraqis to this day study in clay schools distributed in the southern governorates. There are Iraqis who study in schools without electricity, in a bad study environment with very poor educational quality, to the point that Iraq was excluded from the Davis Quality Index for education. With the poor educational quality, Iraq is considered one of the most difficult educational systems in the Middle East. But Iraq is outside of the ranking of the best countries for education in the Middle East. I am a student, and one question remains on my mind. Do we deserve all this? We as Iraqi students deserve to wake up in the morning and go to an educational institution that is not recognized. We study the worst curriculum in very old and primitive ways, in very bad environment. How does the Iraqi government wait for us to be effective members of society? How will we build Iraq after our parents and grandparents? The problem of education is not an easy problem, but rather it is a matter on which the future of Iraq depends on. And education is the simplest right, and it is the right of any individual in this world.